Right, so I think we are ready to kick off. So welcome everyone. Really good to have you all here today. So it's great that you're here to join us for the London and South East region's first Thursday event, where we are delighted to have a panel discussion on new business in the new normal. My name's Stephen. I'm the recruitment lead for the London South East Committee. First of all, I'd like to say a really big thank you to all of the CIOF First Thursday volunteers. All been busy away planning today's event behind the scenes. We're all volunteers and dedicated to promoting excellence in fundraising. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone. If you would like to tweet about today's event, really be great to do so. The handle is at CIOF London SE. We'll put that in the chat for you as well, so you can tweet around. Just a reminder that today's session will be recorded, so if you want to anonymise yourself, please feel free to do so. The recording will be available later online on our YouTube channel. So I think we should get started and kick off straight away. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Becky. So Becky is a senior specialist in high value fundraising with more than 10 years experience. Presently head of private sector partnerships and engagement at ActionAid UK. Becky established a new corporate partnerships function which developed 1 million plus advocacy-based funding. Becky's experience focuses mainly on the UK health sector, where she had held senior roles at Breast Cancer Care, Breast Cancer, which is now called Breast Cancer Now, Marie Curie, JDRF, and leading a team of developing multi-million-pound partnerships. We're also going to be hearing from Yunus. So Yunus, having started his career in the private sector, moved to the charity sector several years ago and worked in corporate fundraising at Bliss Kids before moving to Barnardo's, helping to raise over 1.5 million for children's causes. Last but no means least, we have Ellie. So Ellie, who started her career in the commercial sector in IT sales of all things. She worked at the British Heart Foundation as a regional corporate partnership manager before moving to the national new business team, specialising in commercial partnerships. She now leads the new business team at Ambitious About Autism. So thank you very much, guys, for joining us. And I want to thank all the panel too. If we can, we're ready to kick off with Becky, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that introduction, and apologies. It's yeah, that was rather kind of confusing introduction for me. I will say that I've got kind of previous experience in the UK health sector, but currently I work for ActionAid UK, which is obviously international development. And I think I wanted to kind of say this first of all, because as someone that has got experience in kind of the UK sector, I do recognise that some of what I say today will be mainly relevant for those organisations who more align to the Sustainable Development Goals, because my experience over the past 3 years has been focused, as I say, more on international development. However, hopefully much of what I say will still be transferable across all charities. I just want to be really upfront about that, because I know that the experience of INGOs is quite different to the experience of other organisations, having made that transition myself. So I'm going to start off today by talking about how to create a strategy for an uncertain future. And I think the answer to this question is relatively straightforward in terms of how to do it in theory, because there are certain principles which should apply. But I'm also going to kind of talk about some specific examples of how we've done this at ActionAid to kind of bring about some kind of tangibility to those. So I guess some kind of top line tips, I would say, for creating a strategy in uncertain times is kind of shifting from that longer term strategy to something shorter term. So maybe putting together a 2-year plan rather than a 5-year plan. Definitely don't expect growth to come naturally. I know as fundraisers, we're always desperate to say next year we're going to raise more than this year, but during uncertain times, really try not to do that, because things are just, it's different. So you really need to be realistic about what to expect. And the same for expenditure. Obviously, we need to work a bit more with what we have in uncertain times than expecting expenditure budgets to increase. I think obviously increasing the amount of variety in your funding sources is going to be really, really crucial, and maintaining real flexibility over the strategy with more regular reviews. So I'll talk about how we do that at ActionAid. For me, the fifth one is around kind of carving out more time to specifically analyse trends and ensure that you maintain relevance by investing in comms and influencing work. So it might be that kind of some of that time is spent kind of stepping away from fundraising, which I know probably feels quite unnatural, but it's going to be really, really important when things are changing so regularly, particularly if you're leading a team or a senior member of a team. And the last one is really important: look after your team. Goodness me, no one wants to be doing recruitment when things are so uncertain. So really making sure that you're looking after a team during this time and making sure they continue to get the development that they need during uncertain times is absolutely crucial, but also something that some organisations forget, because when we're kind of tight on budgets and we're not sure kind of where the money's coming from, things like learning and development and that kind of thing tend to be squeezed, but it's probably more important than ever. So I'm going to talk through kind of a couple of examples of how we've done this at ActionAid in the past couple of years. So if I can move on to the next slide, Vicky. Great. So at ActionAid, so as I said, I head up the private sector partnerships team. So specifically looking at our strategy, I've made sure that at least 10% of our time is devoted to influencing and positioning ourselves in the right spaces. So, you know, what that means is this won't bring in income directly, but it will make sure that we are in the right place and kind of positioning ourselves well for when kind of fundraising opportunities arise. So an example of this is we identified that many of our prospects are interacting with an organisation called Business Fights Poverty, which puts out a lot of kind of articles and do a lot of events. And really they were speaking to everyone that we wanted to speak to. So one of the things we did at the beginning of this year was reach out to Business Fights Poverty to see if ActionAid could become a content partner of theirs, which means that we kind of work with them to put out a number of articles or run a number of kind of take part in a number of events throughout the year, which is really putting ourselves in front of the audience we want to speak to. That's just one really tangible example. One of the other things we've done is kind of, obviously we have annual plans, so we have our kind of 5-year strategy and then we have annual plans. But what we started to do kind of when the pandemic hit was also kind of look at our annual plans on a quarterly basis, but in a really kind of forensic way, if you like. So that might seem like overkill to be kind of looking at plans and planning on a quarterly basis. Yes, so planning on a quarterly basis might seem like overkill, but actually what it's enabled us to do is enable us to kind of quickly respond to new trends, and also to make sure that our strategy document remains a live document. In other organisations I've worked at previously, the strategy is something maybe that the head of team looks at maybe once a year, maybe twice a year, but the rest of the team don't really get too involved. And I think that kind of being able to kind of bring the team into this and make it more of a live document is crucial, being able to kind of pivot quickly when new trends arise. And the last one I would just say on this as an example from ActionAid is, obviously when you have a strategy and then midway through the strategy, like with ours, things change, because we are almost towards the end of a 5-year strategy, so the pandemic was a massive change for us. We had a requirement for certain resources, which required a certain amount of expenditure in order to meet our strategy aims for growth. So one of the things I did at the beginning of the pandemic was review all of those and consider kind of where else this support could come from internally. So for example, some of our work we wanted to do was on developing brand partnerships. So I looked at what resource we could borrow from the comms team and how we could get them more involved so that they could support on that. So that's just a few examples there. If we can go on to the next slide, Vicky. So the next piece I wanted to talk about was about maintaining relevance and making yourself stand out from the crowd. So a couple of top line tips I'm going to talk through in a bit more detail. I think the first one is going to feel very, very alien, which is don't be afraid to stop fundraising for a period. I know that for ActionAid, we're an international charity that focuses on women and girls, and we don't do any work in the UK. So when the pandemic hit, and it was very much naturally focused on UK and health, we weren't really relevant. So one of the things that we did very, very quickly was stop fundraising. We stopped doing our kind of prospecting strategy for new business within my team because we would have been wasting our time. It doesn't mean we stopped working. One of the things we did was we recognised that where companies weren't kind of focusing too much on our cause at that time, governments still were. So we started to focus on businesses who were working with the government. So for example, we had a partnership with Unilever and FCDO because the governments were still wanting to fund globally rather than just focusing on the UK. We also took time to show support to our current supporters, so to really kind of engage them and kind of show them what they're going through. And then we also kind of pivoted a lot of our work towards more kind of profile building. So some of the work I mentioned there about our strategy being 10% focused on influencing, we kind of upped that percentage for a period to make sure that we were kind of relevant and in the right conversations for when the time came. I said it in the previous slide about taking time to review trends, but I think particularly with coronavirus, this for us was really, really crucial because the UK was hit really, really hard quite early in coronavirus in the pandemic, and other countries where we work kind of came along a bit later. So we were able to kind of really review what was happening in the UK and take that into learnings for when places like you know, Kenya and Brazil and others kind of started to be impacted more than they were previously. I think another crucial thing is thinking about all of the things your charity does and what could be interesting for an external audience to hear about. One of the things that we found was some of the things that we do and we've done for our entire history are not really things that we always speak about to our business partners or potential business partners, but they became relevant in the pandemic. So, for example, talking more about our work on violence against women and girls, it's something that businesses have never previously been very interested in speaking to us about because it's quite a sensitive topic. But with the increase in violence, that was something that businesses all of a sudden were more interested in speaking to us about. So we did quite a lot of thought leadership pieces around that. Equally, with the Black Lives Matter and kind of the rise of that movement, we were able to talk a lot more about our work on feminist leadership and anti-racism and decolonisation, which again we'd always done but hadn't taken to a corporate audience before. So it's thinking about those areas as well. And then last but not least, kind of really speaking to your existing supporters about why they support you. We were quite surprised when we did this about kind of some of the reasons that they gave. You kind of expect maybe if you kind of put out a proposal and they accept it, that's the reason that they support you, but sometimes it's not. It's something kind of a bit different. And we found that a lot of the businesses that we were speaking to supported us because they really loved how credible ActionAid was, because we have such a strong advocacy stance, and all of our kind of advocacy and policy work is quite challenging to businesses, but they actually liked that. So we haven't previously spoken much about our advocacy work because it's always been a point of tension, but actually from that insight we were able to kind of focus much more on our advocacy work, which then actually gave us something to speak about from a UK perspective. Because actually, you know, we don't, as I say, we don't do any programs in the UK, but we do a lot of advocacy work in the UK. So that then kind of gave us further relevance. And the final piece I just wanted to talk about, onto the next slide, is about how to source cold prospects digitally. So there's lots of ways that we can kind of go with this, but the one that I wanted to talk specifically about was online conferences. Because for me, I've always found conferences really, really helpful in terms of new business, but actually since the pandemic and they've all gone online, I find them so much more helpful because you can be a lot more targeted. So there's just a couple of, again, some kind of top line tips or things that I think are useful for this. So pre-conference, always contact the organisers to see if you can have a speaking slot. I think it's something that people possibly don't do enough, but as someone who has organised conferences or been on kind of conference panels, I know that you always get to a point where you're going back to the same people again and again, and actually if someone comes to you with a kind of just a slightly different voice or a different angle, or just even just them being a different person, that's actually kind of really attractive, and it gives you the opportunity to have that platform as well. So I think definitely always do that. Research attendees in advance. That's an obvious one in its own sense, but I would say research the attendees, but also kind of research kind of specifically, you know, what it is that you want to talk to them about and what is your USP for being at that conference. A third one is around kind of really clocking who attends each session and sending them individual relevant LinkedIn messages to those that you want to connect with. Someone in my team actually used to attend conferences and not listen to any of the sessions whatsoever. He was completely focused on who is in the session, who's speaking in the chat, what are they saying, how can I pick up them? And he was kind of always on kind of half in the session, half in LinkedIn engaging. And kind of in one of those instances, one of a business mentioned the fact that they were looking, kind of they asked a question around, you know, how can I better involve the community in their sustainability work? Now that's something which he was able to then immediately reach out to them, because that's basically what ActionAid does, and talk to them about kind of how we could support them to kind of identify how they could involve the community in some of the work that they were already doing. What that has then turned into is a broader conversation about how we can develop a 5-year partnership together, kind of based on a lot of the alignments that we found. So definitely looking out on the questions that people are asking. But then conversely, I would also really, really encourage, for any session you go to, always ask a question, but always make it a super selfish question. So, you know, for example, I went to a conference and was in a session, and it was about something really broad. I think it was about agriculture. And, you know, for ActionAid, our focus is on women and girls, and we do focus on agriculture, but it's a very specific focus. So I asked the question about kind of what are the differential impacts on human rights abuses in this sector on young girls. And it was kind of my way of highlighting kind of what ActionAid is about and kind of what I'm interested in, but also sense checking from the rest of the attendees if that's something they would be interested in as well. And actually in that particular example, the sustainability director then kind of liked my comment, or kind of added to my comment, I can't quite remember my question, and I connected with him afterwards, and it turned out that this company were actually putting together a gender strategy. So I was then able to work with them to kind of develop a partnership which is about to commence, which is a 3-year partnership, working with them on that basis. So sorry, that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour. I'm trying to give as many really specific examples as possible because I know that they're helpful. But I would now like to hand over to Yunus.
Hi guys, so I'm Yunus. I'll give you a very quick whistle-stop tour. A lot of it Becky's already covered, so thank you for that, Becky, really interesting. But I'll very quickly go over sort of 4 points on each of the areas we're covering. So sourcing cold prospects digitally. For us, I mean, for everybody, we've seen a lot has changed over the last few sort of month or couple of years. And one of the things I think for us has been really key is working smarter. We've all seen the changing landscape, and you know, we've had to reevaluate the sectors that we've been looking at working in. So you know, giving examples, but one of my core areas is looking at leisure and tourism, and looking at sort of the airline industry and companies like that. Beginning of the pandemic, they completely fell off the cliff. And you know, that was something that we had to reevaluate and look at and sort of see. But at the same time, tech companies, delivery companies, you know, quite a few others were doing really well during the pandemic. And I think reevaluating where there's opportunity is really key. So that's something. I think other than that, during this sort of journey, we've seen companies reevaluate, you know, making sure that they've got more of a positioning with purpose. ESG and the UN sustainability goals have become really sort of crucial to what a lot of companies are doing. And I think looking at that and seeing how you align to a lot of that has been really key. Internally, I think working more joint up has been really important. A couple of examples of that, I think we've set up more internal working groups across teams than we have ever before. And that's been really interesting, because a lot of the times what you'll get is somebody will know somebody from IG, from individual giving, will know somebody in a company who can give you a sort of heads up or get you into a meeting with them. Similarly, I think one of the things that we've looked to do when we've done our crisis appeal at Barnardo's very early on, we looked at the individual giving data and tried to pair up anybody who gave a donation that was from a company background, so had a company email, got in touch with the individual person, individual giving person who headed that up, and looked at how we could then maybe approach them. And we've had real success with that. Long old journey, and I'll tell you a bit more about that. But I think looking at what you've already got and how do you maximize that is really key. And then, I'm sure most of us doing it, but looking at sort of LinkedIn, Pearl Finders, e-marketing, any of those sort of data lists that you can get. At the moment, the landscape and those people in those roles are changing so quickly, and needing to keep up with that information is really crucial. Secondly, I think just looking at it and looking at how do you get ahead, and what I mean by that is, I think there's always several hurdles that we all jump over in order to sort of get to where we want to get, which is, engagement with a corporate lead or whoever it may be, that can hopefully then lead to that partnership. Now, we'll all do emails and we'll send out emails, but as you can imagine, as life has really changed, those people that we're trying to target are probably getting bombarded by emails all day, every day. And so you're not really getting ahead. And everyone's probably aware of degrees of separation in terms of how we connect with people around the world. But I think there's also engagement degrees of separation. And what you've got to do is really get front of mind with those people that you're trying to engage with. So if it is email, that's going to be sort of the first hurdle, but phone call works a little better, video call if you can, or a face-to-face meeting. And this is nothing new, but I think it's more relevant now than it's ever been, because where we're trying to engage with people, everybody, I think, as we've seen in our own lives, there's so much going on, we're spinning so many plates. So I think that trying to keep front of mind is really important. Without becoming a stalker, obviously. But I think, you really need to look at it and say, okay, well, how do I do that? And if it is talking with people and trying to find out what's relevant to them above and beyond what work they're doing, that's really worked for us really well. It's been a really good way to sort of get involved. And I'll give you a few examples of that in a bit. If you can, hold events. Webinars have become the thing now, and you can do that. We recently done an impact webinar. We had our new impact report come out. We done a webinar on that. We had corporates who spoke on our behalf and was really engaging and really useful. Similarly, we've tried to start doing events again, sort of live events, mixed sort of responses. But again, it's really important to get people that you want to into a room. If you're a smaller charity, if there's a local venue, a local restaurant or something, I've done this in the past when I worked at Kids, Fredericks in Islington. I think it cost us something like £100 to put on a business breakfast. We had about 32, 34 corporates attend. Really useful way, morning breakfast, 8:30 to 9:30. Little chat afterwards, really works well, cost £100. You're not really committing massively. So I think that's really important. Something I think Becky really touched on, patience for us. I think, corporate partners, again, there's a lot of change going on within the companies that you're trying to engage with, a lot of sort of people being let off in companies, a lot of changes with how their policies and their CSR criteria are changing. Have patience with them, because you're not going to get the responses by sort of really pushing on it. Similarly with internal teams, I've seen it more than ever now where, you might need to get a video done and you don't have the resource, or the people that you're trying to engage with can't sort of engage and get that done. I think really be sort of mindful of that, and equally be patient with yourself. This journey, this landscape is changing so rapidly. And I think, you know, unless you take a moment for yourself and really be kind to yourself, I think you'll really struggle with this. And then finally, embrace the change. You know, we all know it's happening. We're all seeing it. We had, you know, I mentioned leisure and tourism. When we first done our campaign during the pandemic, during lockdown, I think 60% of my list came back as either being on furlough or being out of a role. We're seeing that. We know what's going on. We need to sort of be mindful of that. And I think for us and for Barnardo's, what we've seen is, I think, take the approach of small starts, big ambitions, where try and engage a corporate. It may not be them giving you massive money or you know, sort of massive engagement, but if you can do a small sort of, you know, action with them. So Vodafone's a good example of that. My colleague Laura, who brought on that partnership, she sort of worked that partnership for quite a while. Initially, it was quite a small sort of, you know, interaction. She then managed to get them onto sponsoring our Kidsmas Live event. And then it's really grown, and I don't know if anybody's seen the Vodafone adverts at the moment for Christmas. You know, that whole big tech appeal, we're part of that as a partnership, you know, and that partnership's really growing. Ocean Outdoors, when we started with them, we had pro bono sort of just them putting our digital adverts across their digital boards across 15 cities. We then were on Piccadilly Lights, and that really fed into our crisis appeal and really helped us sort of get a lot of involvement there. And Pokemon is a great example. You know, we started that where it was a donation was made in our individual giving team. I then sort of, you know, followed up on that and got in touch with the person there. He was quite senior, wasn't in the CSR team, but has really helped us engage. We initially had a donation of products, and now we are global partners. We are 2 of the only UK partners for Pokemon now, and moving forward, that's really looking interesting. So really good way. So I think really embrace that change and sort of move on with it. If we can move to the next slide. Maintaining relevance and making yourself stand out from the crowd. First thing I would say on that is, you know, unless yours is a really obscure cause, you've never been more relevant. You know, we've got increased need in whatever we're looking at. You know, we work with children and young people and families. There's never been more of a need to support those vulnerable families. Reduce income, as most charities have seen, and you know, corporates are mindful of that, the public's mindful of that, they've seen that, and then it's harder to reach. You know, we've got more barriers to get to those people. So people are mindful, your cause has never been more relevant. So make sure, you know, you are able to put that out, and you are able to really sort of build on that. And then within that, with corporates, it's that engagement that we're looking at. So, you know, how do you stay front of mind? My colleague who I mentioned, Laura, who built the Vodafone partnership, she's exceptional at once she's had a meeting with somebody, she will find out what is of interest to them personally, and then she will follow up. She'll set up, you know, she'll have WhatsApp conversations with them, she'll have, you know, chats with them. Myself, the Pokemon partnership that I mentioned, it took a long old process from, you know, middle of last year to now, where we've got to, where we've built that partnership. And throughout, Pokemon themselves were looking at what causes are relevant to them, what is their CSR criteria, and they were setting up a global sort of scheme. So, you know, that journey is always taking longer than it ever has. And so how do you stay front of mind? So, you know, I'd have great conversations with my contact there. I'd really lean on him to understand what resonates with him with Barnardo's. Why does he support Barnardo's? Really, you know, putting the onus on him that his value is really important to us. I'd send him jokes. So my daughter told me a joke, and I you know, you can put the answers in text chat, but why do you never get changed in front of a Pokemon? And so I'd send him that, and it just be little conversations which would just keep us front of mind during this whole process and make sure we're there. Stories, I think, you know, never been more important. You know, we've got that distance now where we can't meet as often as we'd like with corporates or with partners or anybody who can influence for us. Those stories, you know, connecting them to the cause, through videos, through events, whatever it may be. You've really got to get that story across. And you know, the best meetings I've had, I used to work at Kids, which was a disabled children's charity, and I would always hold our meetings at the playgrounds, and we always had a constant need for more money to support the playgrounds to make sure they keep running. And I'd have those meetings and it'd be really difficult to get a lot of corporates. We had one which had said no on our initial application, but was agreeing to meet with us. I'd always set our meetings at 2:30 because the children would finish school at 3:30, and then they'd start coming in. And we'd have conversations which were really difficult conversations, and you know, they'd tell us why they couldn't support. And then once they'd meet the children and understand why that place was so valuable to them, they change their mind. And I've seen that many a time. I think, you know, really connecting those people to our causes is fundamental. And then perseverance. Like I said, you know, I worked in design industry before, and there was a real good quote that I saw, which was, you have to kiss a lot of frogs to find a prince, but that one prince can pay for a lot of frogs. And I think during this sort of process where it is harder, you know, there's times where you will be hitting your head against a brick wall. There's times where you think you've got to that partnership, you know, and it's about to get agreed, and then something changes internally, and you know, we struggle to get that across. Persevere. It's a long old journey. That journey is getting longer in terms of how we're developing those partnerships, but do keep persevering. Next slide, please. And then finally, creating a strategy for uncertain future. This one I probably struggled more than most in terms of looking at how I respond, because I think to an extent, most of us are winging it at the moment. So I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think where the landscape is so uncertain, don't be afraid of that. But a few pointers that I did sort of put together. I think firstly, that shouldn't be work smarter. It should be don't reinvent the wheel. You know, those strategies that you've got already in place, they are there and they have been working. I don't know if anyone else goes to the Goldman Sachs Charity Forum, but I try and go there to that every year. And they really give you a really good analysis of how they look at financial markets. And what you realize is that we all look at things in a bubble. You know, this period that we're going through, the fundamentals of fundraising doesn't change. The fundamentals of corporate partnerships doesn't change. You know, we are still trying to engage with corporates. We're trying to sell them our cause, trying to get them to support us, and then relaying that impact that they're having. No matter what the sort of macro environment is, that doesn't change. And so your strategy, there probably is a lot in there that is still very relevant, and you should be leaning on that. Flexibility, I think that was something that, you know, reassess constantly. I think Becky touched on having a shorter sort of corporate strategy. Completely agree with that. I think, you know, no problem with putting in place a long strategy with sort of, you know, markers along the road and looking at that constantly and reassess. Pivot wherever you need to. I think don't spend too much time if it's not working. So like I said, the leisure and tourism industry, if that is something that isn't working, look at other sectors, look at where you resonate. If it is still within the leisure and tourism sector, is there something that you really do connect with an organization which will help you sort of build that relationship? ESG, UN Sustainable Goals, purpose, I've mentioned that. You know, do look at that landscape above and beyond coronavirus and whatever we're seeing. You know, what is relevant to those companies that we really can help them sort of succeed with, and play the long goal. I think, you know, I said about small starts, big ambitions. One thing that we done and we looked at and you know, where we did see a lot of companies at the beginning of the first lockdown, the second lockdown, they stopped giving a lot of financial support, but were willing to give a lot of workforce support, volunteering, whatever it may be, gift in kind. We added that to our income tracker. So we had gift in kind added to our income tracker to say, okay, what is the value of that? And then looking down the line, how do we build on that? And I think it's really key that you do stuff like that, because the landscape had changed. You know, we weren't seeing corporates give as much as they were before, and a lot of them had put on hold a lot of the schemes that they had. If that's the case, you're never going to sort of, you're going to really struggle to get that engagement and that traction and those results you want. So you've really got to sort of be flexible on that. I'll touch on digital before I touch on journey. That digital, analyze the data. We're now, charities big and small, we're getting really good at getting that information, getting that data. Do analyze it. What's working, what's not. Where's the market heading? Who is engaging with us? How do we build on that? Using tools for connection, whether it's simple Excel spreadsheets or Trello boards or LinkedIn or whatever it may be. Really build on that and really embrace the ways we're seeing people work. Videos have never been more prevalent than they are now. TikTok can sort of agree to that. But if you can pull together, even if it's a rough video, pull that together, put that out there, get your story out there, get your beneficiaries involved in that, see what you can put out there, hold webinars, get onto all of that. Really reduce that sort of distance between you and the corporates. And the reason why I left Journey at the end is, I think buy-in from the top is really key. If your strategy pre-COVID was to raise, I don't know, 200,000 from corporate, and you saw that stop, unless you're explaining that to those above you and really getting their buy-in and their understanding that this is the situation, this is the scenario, and we need to change the way we look at income, or we need to look at the longer game. Unless you've got that buy-in, you're going to have those pressures that you are going to get too much, and you're going to make short-term decisions rather than longer-term decisions. So get buy-in from the top, and then get buy-in from others. Where we're now remote working, we don't have that flexibility of walking over to another desk and talking to others and getting them to sort of support you. So then when a corporate does want something yesterday, you're then sort of having to scurry and really get those people involved. So build those relationships. And that's my whistle-stop tour. Thank you. And the answer for the Pokemon one was, why do you never get changed in front of a Pokemon? Is because they'll peek at you.
Loving that joke, Yunus. Right, we're going to hand over to Ellie now before we take questions. Thank you, Ellie.
Perfect. I'm hoping that you can all hear me and see my screen.
Yes, yeah, we're all good.
Oh, perfect. So my name is Ellie, and I'm relatively new to Ambitious About Autism. I've been here about 3-4 months. The majority of my time in the pandemic was actually at the British Heart Foundation. So I'm going to focus on some examples from that, some really great points from Yunus and Becky. So I'm going to do a whistle-stop tour, and hopefully you'll get a few helpful tips. So actually, during the pandemic, I am specifically new business as well. So hopefully these will be some quite tangible tips that you can take to your own organisations. I actually had one of my best years as a corporate fundraiser. I facilitated over £1 million worth of new business. I think it was from looking at things a little bit differently. And for me, it was coming from the commercial sector. It was a time to make strategies more commercial. And that was something I'd been struggling to push internally. And I think it worked quite well. So hopefully this will bring some good tips for you. And these are some of the things that I'm going to cover quickly, just kind of taking you through the whole sales cycle. So all those partnerships that I won were from cold, completely, no previous relationship. So how did we go about finding those prospects and looking at them and getting them interested in us? I put standing out from the crowd. I think we've all used that one. So how did we go about doing that? Obviously, the British Heart Foundation is a medical research charity, and those of you from medical research charities will know sometimes that can be hard to make sexy, particularly in a pandemic. So now going to a children and young persons charity, I've got some different viewpoints on those as well. And finally, looking forward, so creating a strategy for that uncertain future. You probably saw me giggle when Yunus said we're kind of all making it up as we go along at the minute, and I think I'll probably echo those points. So first, prospecting. So the first thing that I thought, so I think when we went into the pandemic, I think everyone can resonate with this. I think we went into lockdown and there was that week where half of our teams were furloughed and we all just sat in meetings like this. All our income stopped. the world has stopped, what are we going to do? And I think at that point, I took my fundraiser hat off and put my commercial hat on and started to think, actually, it's not just us that feel like this as fundraisers. The whole commercial world feels like that. Every business had their challenges. So this is where we really started to think about that give-get relationship, and it really started to become a partnership. So instead of going out to corporates like, we're desperate for money, we need this, everything, it started to be like, okay, what are the problems for those corporates? What are the problems that we're having? And how can we pool resources and work together to fix both of those? So when I put Find Your Prospect, what's so great about us, I've used Mindful Chef as an example on this slide. So that's one of the partnerships I came up with. I took a step back and I thought, what as the British Heart Foundation do we have that other charities won't have to offer corporate partners in this time? So an issue for beneficiaries, for us, was that people couldn't get food, they couldn't get a shop. Tesco could not get a shopping slot for love nor money. My mum was furious because she normally has them every week. She couldn't get over it. So that was an issue for everyone across the country. No shopping slots. Who was doing well out of that? Oh, food box delivery companies. What was an issue specifically for our beneficiaries was heart healthy food. What do we have as the British Heart Foundation? Nutritionists who know all about heart healthy food. So that was when I came up with the idea for, could we collaborate with a food box company? What we can give them is things to help their recipes be more heart healthy. We can give them the credibility of partnering with us as a charity. What can they give us? Well, quite frankly, some money in return for that service, so we can continue to deliver our other services. So that's what I mean by what's so great about us. What do your beneficiaries need? What have you got to offer? And what are the sectors looking like? What do they need from you? What can you do to help? And what can they give you? So that's, I guess, where research comes in. So it's all about your prospect. Don't think of, it's really hard to do this, but stop thinking about you as a charity and what you need. Think about what each sector needs and what you can give to them. There's another example on the next slide, which will talk to that quite well. And yeah, using the best tools. I won't go into this too much because Yunus has made some great points on this. But essentially, when you get the theme of the partnership you're going after, you don't have to go after the CSR people. You don't have to go after HR people. Who am I going to talk to about this, which is essentially going to be a customer-facing partnership, someone in marketing? LinkedIn, for me, has been the best tool during the pandemic. I've found that people are really willing to just have a virtual coffee and really kind of speak to those ideas. So reach out on LinkedIn, go on Eventbrite, see if there's any events that those companies are going to, as kind of Becky gave some great tips on that as well. Google, see what those companies are doing. A really great tip I can use you about getting in touch with corporate partners, which worked quite well for me, was if you Google, for example, Mindful Chef PR contacts, they'll generally always have a PR or marketing email on their website for marketing inquiries, and I would just always use that. And that really helped me get in touch with a lot of companies, giving away all my top secrets now, so. And standing out from the crowd. So once you've got that initial hook and they're thinking, oh, this is different, a charity actually wants to give us something for a change, okay, let's have this conversation. You want to book in that initial call. So I never give away too much on that first email, just to get the bite. I don't send them a spiel, send them one paragraph. This is my idea. This is what I think would be great together. Got loads of ideas. Let's have a call to talk about it. Even if you don't have loads of ideas, just say it to get the call. And then they're like, yeah, great. And you think, oh God, what ideas am I going to have on the call? So standing out from the crowd, for me, I've used this as a bit for that second stage of the sales cycle, that initial insight call, engaging the people. So the most important thing for me on this, which I always used to talk to my fundraising managers about, is the call structure. So always ask questions, because that is how you know. So I've done this research. I've got a preconceived idea of what I think we could offer, what I think they might want. I might be completely wrong. So I've used Virgin Media. I don't know if you've seen some of the press around this in the past month, which is exciting for me, because until this point we weren't allowed to speak about it publicly. So now I've gone, they're allowed to speak about it publicly, which is great. But this was one of my partnerships at the British Heart Foundation, which was so exciting. So When I had this initial call with Virgin Media, I had lots of ideas about things that they wanted that we could do. And when I started speaking to them, what I got from them by really digging into those pain points, so I was like, oh, what is one of the main issues that you're facing at the minute, was the fact that when Virgin Media vans come to people's streets, you probably all had it, you know, when they want to redo the Wi-Fi and your Wi-Fi doesn't work and it's so irritating, was customer perception. So I went away and I thought, how can we help them with customer perception? And based on that initial call with Virgin Media and getting that insight, I was able to do some more research and work collaboratively with them to come up with this concept of training all the engineers in CPR, them buying DFIBs off us as the BHF, because then if we could get press, which they now have done around it, people don't mind as much a van coming and messing with the Wi-Fi if they know that if they're going to have a cardiac arrest, the engineers could save their life. So I found what their pain point was by always asking questions first, and I was able to adapt my approach, listen and respond, which was my next point, always covering 2 points in one. And yeah, just finally take notes, because I think within the pandemic, the key for me was talking to as many people as possible and having as many pitches as possible. Now, in order to do that, I needed like a blank pitch, like a kind of standard pitch deck that I could just go into all these meetings with. But you want that corporate to feel like this is the most bespoke thing in the world for them. And if you ask the right questions and you can make that pitch feel so bespoke. Every single one that I came off, they were like, you've listened to us, we feel like you really know what we want. And you've spent so much time on this. And I'd be like, I have, yeah, thank you. But really, I just listened to those few things and tweaked it. So if anyone wants, I've got like a list of insight questions. If anyone wants that, I'm happy to email, but just really drilling down on those insight questions to ensure that you can make it feel really bespoke. So even things like, what's most important for you in your comm strategy moving forward? Is it Facebook? Is it Twitter? Is it Instagram? Then in your PowerPoint, you can do a mock-up of a Twitter post because they said Twitter, not Instagram. It's just the tiniest things like that that make people really feel like you've listened to them. And finally, creating a strategy for an uncertain future. I managed to learn how to put GIFs in PowerPoints. I was really pleased with this. As you said, I think it's definitely about being adaptable and moving forward, but also thinking, okay, what can we do now that we can keep doing and we can keep growing? So one thing that we came up with at the British Heart Foundation was Heart Month. I recognise that a lot of corporate partners wanted this give-get relationship. One of the things as a big charity that we had was PR reach and brand awareness. At Ambitious About Autism, the hook that we have is slightly different because we're slightly smaller. So what I would go out with is slightly different. But what I started at the British Heart Foundation because of that was Heart Month. So this was a way, it was essentially very similar to Breast Cancer Awareness Month, where companies could come to us, donate a percentage of profit sales, and in return we put a press and PR pack together. So you can see SIF on the right hand side, that was one of my partnerships for that month, and that was something that we knew that we could easily do that year, but that also we could grow year on year on year. So I think as well as being adaptable, it's also having one eye on the future as well and making sure you're doing things that can grow and that you're putting things in place that you can use for future years. So that was just a really quick whistle stop tour because I know we're near the end and I want to make sure you've all got time for questions. So I will stop sharing. I don't know how you do that. Oh, here we are. I do.
Thank you very much, Ellie. Great. Really appreciate that. So I'm going to hand over to Vicky very quickly. Thank you, panel, for the questions.
Yeah, thanks so much. That was fantastic, everyone. And yeah, we've got some really interesting questions. So I'll kick off with the first question is for Becky. And it says, what different resources did you use to find out the best conferences for your charity to attend?
Oh, yeah, can you guys hear me? Yeah, great question. I think one of the obviously from an international development perspective, we are focusing on things like sustainable development goals and kind of very, very aligned with businesses' sustainability strategies rather than maybe their CSR or marketing strategies. So I guess that's one thing I'll say up front. For us, it was kind of keeping abreast of, where our key prospects are speaking. So we would have a list of, 20 key businesses that we feel like we should be partnering with and we'd like to partner with. And then we have a list of kind of all of the kind of influential kind of senior people within those businesses who are decision makers, and then kind of keep a bit of an eye on kind of where they are attending, where they're maybe speaking, because that gives us a good idea if that's going to be relevant for us. I think one of the other key things we do at ActionAid is we take a strong programmatic approach to our partnerships. So broadly speaking, we will always seek partnerships which are aligned either with our climate justice programs or with kind of the intersect with businesses' supply chains. So again, we're able to kind of really focus in on conferences that are just about climate change or supply chain in terms of sustainability. So that's really helpful. I think the other thing is around, there are a lot of business forums for sustainability. So being able to kind of get in the spaces that they are as well, so that you can kind of be kept updated and kind of more proactively on conferences that are coming up. But then equally with individual businesses as well. So for all of our top prospects, we have made sure that we're on all of their kind of broader lists, so that any time that individual businesses do conferences, we are kind of kept abreast of that as well. So for example, Unilever are doing a conference today on the future of work, some of which is going to be relevant to us, some of which isn't, but I found out about that from Unilever directly, and then I'm kind of deciding which sessions I go to now that I've seen the agenda. So yeah, it's just a few bits.
Thank you so much. And I've got a question for all panelists, so you can decide sort of who wants to take this. But this is from Emma. So it says, how do you set realistic expectations with the board who do not have any understanding of fundraising? So for context, we are a small team of 2 with 2 successful partnerships, yet the board keep making suggestions about getting partnerships with big brands such as Waitrose or Tesco.
I'll jump in on that one if you want. So speaking from my small charity experience, which might be a bit more relevant, do you know, I think I quite often had that. I had that at Kids, I had that at Bliss. And I think what you find is often there's some great ideas, and I think trustees are often quite sort of, I don't know if I should say really helpful in this or really sort of problematic in this. But everybody has this great idea of they'll see other charities doing something and go, oh, that worked really well. And that other charity will have a royal as one of their trustees and will have, a network that they can build on. And so we used to have that. But I think what is really helpful is letting them know what resources we have. If you don't have a royal and place to be, have Kate, and they are going to get that engagement. We don't have that engagement, so it's a case of, okay, well, how else do we link in with that? Often it is helping them understand that the link with a corporate is going to be through purpose, is going to be through that alignment that you have. So I think it's always really important to keep those lines of communications, which is often hard because often you're pushing upwards. But I think it's that communication which is really key. And like I said, I think now more than ever, it's really important because we are seeing some really fantastic partnerships come about, but a lot of those are through who people know and how they've built those relationships. Whilst if you're a smaller sort of charity, it's hard to get that engagement. So I think those lines of communications, I think explaining and helping them understand why it might not be possible is really key.
If I can just add something really quick to that as well. I empathise because when I was at a smaller charity, we had a static cycle event and I was told to go to Sky because they sponsor the Tour de France and British cycling, and I was like, oh, that's just not going to happen. But in that instance, I did go to Sky because, you kind of have to, tick that box, but then actually kind of did the proper work of looking into kind of who would be a good sponsor for that event. But even at ActionAid, which obviously isn't a smaller charity, I still had that same issue where I came in to set up the corporate partnerships team, and the expectation was within a year we would have, you know, millions of pounds from various businesses, because businesses are rich and everyone would want to talk to us. And so one of the things that I did with the board was set up what we called a corporate reference group, where a kind of similar to what Yunus is saying about kind of explaining kind of the situation the charity is in and what our opportunities are. I also kind of took that opportunity to upskill them in what corporate fundraising is and what you can expect and how long things take. And that's been really, really helpful. I did that for a year, and now the board don't come to me with any irritating questions. They actually come to me with some quite great kind of suggestions, and we've had some really good prospects from them. So I think that takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of commitment from the board as well, but I'd say it's definitely worthwhile doing.
Perfect, thank you all. And I think we've probably got time for one more question, but any other questions that haven't been answered I will send out to the speakers, and we'll aim to get you an answer on email ASAP. So a question from Rachel, which is, have any of the speakers ever tried anything a bit more creative to get that initial contact from a cold prospect? So for example, allocating budget to post something that would stand out, like a package that tells them more about your charity. And if you did, how well did it work?
I know what you mean. I've seen this kind of thing on LinkedIn where I've seen a lot of PR agencies do it, where they send like a lockbox of goods, and then you like have to email, you have to like ring them or something to get the goods. I've never personally tried anything like that myself. I've always found that, to be honest, I sometimes think people fixate on one particular corporate or overcomplicate that initial prospecting process. I really think it is as easy as finding someone on LinkedIn, finding an email, sending a quick message with an initial hook and what your idea is. And if they're interested, they'll buy, and if they're not, they're not. And I think you can spend so much time fixating over one corporate, where actually what you need to do is spread your net wide, and the best partnerships you'll get is from the people who are genuinely really interested. And I have thought about doing things like that. My only other reservation is sometimes, I don't know if anyone else has found this from corporates, but even things like Christmas cards, they can get quite funny about the way charities spend their budgets. And I just wonder whether something like that, they would be like, do you really need money from me if you can afford to do this? Because they can be very kind of critical on ROI. But yeah, I think my best advice is to just not overcomplicate it. I'm trying to think of a more polite way to say the saying that I usually always say, but say, if you throw enough stuff at the wall, normally some of it will stick, I think.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much. That was a fantastic session. It was great to hear from all of you. Any unanswered questions, I'll send via email. We can get some answers out. But yeah, thank you again, panelists. That was really great. I'm going to pass over to Stephen just to quickly wrap up this session.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you to the panel. That was really great. We really do appreciate all your time today. And thank you for everyone who joined. Just very quickly, I just wanted to let you know that all these sessions are run by volunteers, and our committee are currently recruiting at the moment. So if you're potentially interested in joining us, please do feel free to reach out to myself. We'll get some details out later. We're currently looking for a marketing lead and also a treasurer to join the committee. So hopefully there may be some people that are interested, and there will be some details coming out. Second of all, we are also able to offer you discount on your membership if you're not already a membership. So please do consider that. So today we're able to offer you a discount of £49 off your annual membership, which is a great saving. And the membership gets you access to discounted rates on future events, discounted rates on fundraising convention, and there's lots of training courses and qualifications that you can now do through the CIOF head office. All members as well have direct support from our policy team, where there are tons of benefits there. So if you are keen, please do let us know, and we'll also share that discount code with you, along with some information from Ellie and any additional questions. So thank you very much, and hopefully you'll be joining us in January. So I'll hand over to Vicky. I think she's got a quick note on our January session.
Yeah, it's just a quick note on the January session. We are still working on this, and we'll release like further details closer to the time. But to allow for some holiday spirit, we will be holding the January 1st Thursday on second Thursday. We will not be changing the names. That could be confusing, and I'll make sure that's made really clearly over the email. But yeah, thanks again, everyone. We're going to jump off this call now, and we'll get those questions out to you along with Eleanor's useful tips as well. Thank you so much. Bye.